Aisha Jibril Alexander didn't just wake up one morning and decide to become someone else. That's not how it works. You don't flip a switch and walk away from everything you've known. No, this was a journey. A long one. See, she was born Aisha Alexander, an American woman with Colombian roots, ambition in her eyes, and the sky in her veins. She wasn't chasing God. She wasn't searching for a new identity. She was a pilot flying commercial jets, living that dream at 35,000 feet, navigating clouds and continents. But life's got a funny way of finding you right where you think you're in control. It sneaks up on you when the engine's humming and the passengers are asleep, and you're staring into the horizon, thinking it's just another day in the cockpit. But something happened, something unexplainable. Maybe it wasn't fireworks, maybe it wasn't a voice from the clouds, but it was enough to shake something loose inside her. A moment, fleeting but fierce, up in the air where man thinks he rules the heavens. She felt something bigger. A presence. Call it divine, call it peace, call it whatever you want. But for her it was the beginning of an unraveling. The pilot who had conquered the skies suddenly found herself looking inward, not outward. She wasn't searching for religion, but something greater pulled her attention to Islam. And the thing is, when something touches your soul mid-flight, when you see something you can't explain with logic or training, you start to question. You start to wonder. You start to feel. So she went quiet, not to the world but to herself, started reading, watching, listening. She didn't come running to the masjid, waving a flag. Nah, she studied alone. She observed Muslims in airports, listened to the call to prayer echo through terminals, watched the serenity in the eyes of people washing their hands and faces before prayer. She saw something real, something grounded, something she hadn't felt even with all the success she had piled up. And that presence she felt up there in the clouds, it started to make sense down here on the ground. When she made the decision to convert, it wasn't for show, wasn't for love, wasn't for anyone but herself. Because when a soul recognizes truth, it doesn't need approval. She chose to become Aisha, not because Alicia was broken, but because she was evolving. She took that Shahada, said those words not with trembling fear, but with the clarity of a pilot landing after a long flight through turbulence. Calm, controlled, ready, and you know what? That's real transformation. That's not just a name change. That's not just wearing a scarf or learning a new prayer. That's a woman who flew to the ends of the earth, only to discover what she was really looking for was already circling inside her. Now tell me that's not something powerful. Tell me that's not divine. She was up there, cruising above the clouds, same route she's flown a dozen times. No turbulence, no distractions, just that familiar hum of the engine and the endless stretch of blue ahead. You gotta understand, pilots live in a different world. They see the sun rise before the rest of us even open our eyes. They chase daylight, race shadows across the globe. But this time, something was different. Something she couldn't shake. She couldn't explain it, couldn't label it, couldn't file it away like a flight plan. It hit her in the chest. Quiet but heavy, not fear, not anxiety, something deeper. Something that didn't belong in the cockpit, but showed up anyway like it owned the place. She looked out that window into the open, into that place where the earth drops away and heaven feels like it's just a breath above. And it was there, in that space, that moment, a shift, a presence. Call it a miracle, call it a sign, call it whatever you want, but it stopped her cold, not in a panic but in awe. It wasn't a storm, wasn't a technical issue, it was stillness, but the kind of stillness that speaks. She said later it felt like time paused, like the air itself held its breath, and in that silence she felt it, felt like something was trying to show her something, not in words, not in visions, but in that unmistakable way the soul recognizes when it's being called. Now look, most people wouldn't understand. They'd hear miracle in the air, and think she saw lights or heard voices. Nah, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it was real. That kind of miracle that don't need flashing signs. The kind that slips into your bones and doesn't leave. It's that whisper that follows you long after the flight's over. She landed that plane like she always did, precise, professional, flawless. But she wasn't the same. Something in her shifted. That moment didn't leave her on the tarmac. It came home with her, sat with her, made her stare at the ceiling at night, wondering what it meant. She tried to shake it, tried to chalk it up to fatigue or altitude or just her mind playing tricks. But deep down, she knew that wasn't just her mind, that was her soul catching fire, and you can't unfeel that. You can't erase that kind of experience. She started looking for answers, but not in the usual places. She didn't run to a therapist. She didn't write it off. She leaned in, started asking questions, started looking at the world differently. That miracle in the sky, it wasn't just a one-off moment. It was the first knock on the door. The one that says, "Wake up." The one that don't leave you alone until you answer, and that's exactly what she did. She answered, quietly, respectfully, but completely. You don't just wake up one day and decide to fly. That dream starts early. It's in the way a kid looks up when a plane crosses the sky. It's in the silence that falls over you the first time you sit in a cockpit and realize this is where you belong. Aisha Jibril Alexander had that in her, born with it, raised in a world that didn't always see women, especially women like her, as the face of aviation, but she didn't flinch. She didn't back down. She trained. She studied. She put in the hours, earned her stripes, and climbed into that captain's seat like it was made for her, because it was. Flying isn't just about knowing your instruments. It's about feeling the rhythm of the sky. It's math and muscle and instinct all rolled into one, and she had it. She became a Boeing 777 pilot, which ain't some small-time gig. That's long-haul heavy duty. That's flying across continents with hundreds of souls depending on you to get them there safe. That kind of responsibility changes a person. It demands discipline. It demands grace under pressure, and she delivered every time. She wore that uniform not just with pride but with purpose. She knew the road, or rather, the sky she had traveled to get there, and it showed in everything she did. But the thing about being at the top of your game is sometimes you still feel a void. You can achieve all the external markers of success and still feel like something's missing. Aisha had everything: the prestige, the paycheck, the passport full of stamps. But that miracle in the air, that moment that cracked something open inside her, it didn't care about titles or medals or how many flight hours she had logged. It reached past all of that. It went straight to her core, and that's where her professional world met her spiritual awakening. She didn't leave one for the other. That's not how it went down. She kept flying, kept showing up, but now every takeoff felt different. Every flight wasn't just a job. It was a reflection, a reminder. The sky wasn't just her office anymore. It was a place of revelation, a place where she had seen something she couldn't unsee, felt something she couldn't ignore. And that made her role as a pilot even more profound. She was navigating not just through airspace, but through belief, through identity, through a deeper understanding of her place in the world. And it wasn't lost on her that she was doing it in a field where women are still underrepresented, where Muslim women, especially converts, are almost invisible. But she didn't shrink. She carried it all: faith, professionalism, and womanhood, with balance. That uniform didn't just represent her rank, it represented her resilience, and now it also held the weight of her faith, her conviction, her story. She was still flying, But now she was flying with something more. For she didn't come from a background where Islam was common, wasn't raised in a Muslim household. There were no Arabic words echoing through the walls of her childhood home, no Ramadan dinners, no Quran on the shelf. Aisha Jibril Alexander, born Alicia, came up in a Latin American household, deeply rooted in Colombian heritage, shaped by both the color and complexity of her culture. But it wasn't just Colombia in her veins. It was America too, the land of hustle, of opportunity, of dreams shaped in airports and ambitions launched into the sky. She lived in two worlds, one filled with the fire and rhythm of South America, the other defined by discipline and drive of the American dream. That cultural duality taught her how to adapt, how to blend in, how to stand out. It gave her edge, but it also gave her questions. Questions about where she belonged, what her roots meant, what she was really building. See, when you grow up between cultures, you learn to switch codes, shift gears, wear different masks. But after a while, you get tired of switching. You want something that fits no matter where you are. Something that centers you, something universal. Flying gave her access to the world, different people, different languages, different religions. She saw humanity from 35,000 feet and from across immigration lines. She witnessed faith expressed in 1,000 ways, from the silent prayers of strangers on flights to the echo of the adhan rolling across tarmacs in countries she barely had time to understand, and it started stirring something in her. She'd walk through airports in the Middle East, in North Africa, Southeast Asia, and something would pull at her, the rhythm of it, the way people paused 5 times a day to reconnect. She'd see the way Islam was not just belief, but lifestyle. Structure, discipline, presence. At first it was just curiosity, a glance, a moment of stillness in the chaos of travel. But over time it became more. It became reflection. It became longing. She didn't say it out loud, not at first. This wasn't something you post about. This was something you carry privately like a seed, and the more she traveled, the more that seed grew. Her Colombian roots gave her passion, her American life gave her power. But this thing she was discovering, this Islam, it gave her peace. Real peace, and it didn't require her to give up her past. It gave her a way to understand it, to honor it. She began learning, slowly, quietly. She studied on long haul layovers, read books in hotel rooms, listened to lectures between flights. And what struck her wasn't just the religion. It was how much it felt like home. Not just a new belief, but a return to something she didn't even know she was missing. Her story wasn't a rejection of her culture. It was a rebalancing, a reclaiming. She was building a bridge between where she came from and who she was becoming, and that bridge was called Islam. It started with a sound, not loud, not aggressive. Just a voice, distant but clear, floating through airport terminals, echoing across foreign city skylines, slipping through the early morning haze like it was made of light, the adhan, the Islamic call to prayer. It wasn't a sound she grew up with. It didn't belong to her world, until one day it did. See, Aisha Jibril Alexander, back when she was still known as Alicia, didn't know what that voice was saying. But she felt it. That's what mattered. She didn't understand the words, but the feeling. Man, the feeling hit different. It didn't just call Muslims to pray. It called something inside her to pause, to listen, to feel. She heard it first on a layover in Istanbul, then again in Dubai, then again in Cairo, and every time it did something to her. It cut through the noise, the rush, the schedules. It slowed her down in the middle of a profession that never stops moving. 5 times a day, the world would freeze for a moment. People would stop what they were doing, roll out prayer mats, turn toward Mecca and surrender. No panic, no pressure, just peace. She watched that. She saw men and women, rich and poor, strangers in the same airport lounge, all move with the same purpose, the same rhythm. That kind of discipline wasn't forced, it was chosen, and that choice, that pulled at her. She started recording the adhan on her phone, not to show anyone, just for herself. She'd listen to it in her hotel rooms, in her car, even on the plane when everything else went quiet. It became a sound she carried with her. And little by little, it started to unlock something inside, a door she didn't know existed, a part of her that had been waiting for a language, for a structure, for something that felt ancient but new at the same time. The adhan didn't just call Muslims to prayer, it called her to reflect, to reevaluate, to explore what was missing. She began asking questions. What were those words? Why did they calm her down? Why did something so foreign feel so familiar? She found out it was a declaration, a reminder that God is greater, that prayer is success, that time is sacred, and that message, man, it cut through everything she thought she knew. It didn't ask her to be perfect. It asked her to be present. That hit deep. She started learning the meaning, memorizing the phrases, saying them to herself, whispering them in the dark. She wasn't Muslim yet, not officially, but her soul was already moving in that direction. The adhan wasn't just background noise anymore. It was the soundtrack to her transformation. It became her compass, pointing her towards something she couldn't ignore. And when she finally took her Shahada, those same words, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu and La ilaha illa Allah, weren't just sounds anymore. They were hers. Her story didn't stay quiet for long. It wasn't the kind you could keep tucked away. A Colombian, American woman, a commercial pilot, a captain in command of a Boeing 777, choosing to embrace Islam after a deeply personal experience in the sky. Yeah, that kind of story travels. But it didn't blow up because it was flashy. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about truth. Raw, quiet truth. And when people saw it, heard it, felt it, something in them moved too. Because people are hungry for real. They're tired of the filtered lives, the fake smiles, the surface-level success stories. Aisha Jibril's journey wasn't about abandoning one life for another. It was about stepping into alignment with who she truly was. And people could see that. The thing is, she didn't plan to become some viral symbol. She wasn't chasing attention, but authenticity, that's magnetic. The way she carried herself, graceful, calm, steady, it made people listen. Muslims and non-Muslims alike saw her and felt something. For some, it was curiosity. For others, it was confirmation. And for many, it was inspiration. Inspiration that transformation doesn't require tragedy. That you can be educated, accomplished, and still have space for God. That faith isn't just for the broken, it's for the awakened. And when that awakening hits, it doesn't matter how high you've climbed. If your soul ain't grounded, you're still drifting. Aisha became that symbol of balance, of how you can have ambition and humility, strength and submission. You can fly across time zones and still make time to bow your head. She made it clear that Islam didn't take anything from her. It gave her more clarity, more peace, more purpose, and that message that resonates in a world full of noise. People who once had no interest in religion found themselves listening to her story, not because she preached, but because she lived it. Quietly, consistently, proudly, and let's be honest, representation matters. Seeing a woman in uniform with her scarf tucked neatly under her captain's stripes, it challenges assumptions. It rewrites narrative. It tells little girls watching from the sidelines that they can lead without leaving their faith behind. It tells women who converted in silence that they're not alone, that faith and flight aren't opposites. They're wings. She didn't ask to be a role model, but that's what she became, not just for converts, not just for Muslim women, for anyone trying to navigate this messy thing called life while holding on to something real. Her presence, her story, her conviction, they made people pause, reflect, and maybe even reconsider what success really means. She showed that it's not always about where you're going. Sometimes it's about who you're becoming on the way there. And that's what stuck with people. That's what made her unforgettable.